All right, I'd like to move on to image optimization. Now, you might be doing this manually, and in fact, you probably still will, even after this lesson, but maybe less so than you did before. So maybe you have an application like ImageOptim, you drag in your images, and it optimizes them and reduces the file size as best as you can. Remember, things like image file sizes are the biggest offender when it comes to performance. You will go crazy trying to debate the difference in performance between single quotes and double quotes in PHP, but then those very same people will reference like a 400K image on their website when that should be a 40K image. So yeah, you can do it manually, or we can have Webpack do this automatically for us, which is cool. So if I go into my source directory, you'll see that I have this new huge 1080 screenshot from the new Zelda. Such a good game, by the way. But anyways, if we were to reveal this in the Finder, you can see that it's 202K, still pretty large. So we're going to try to get that down as best as we can. So we can use an image loader for Webpack. You can see that it will automatically optimize your images. So let's install it right now. And let's switch over to GitHub. Now you can see the usage is very simple. So track down any images, and we will apply the URL loader or the file loader. We're using file loader. And then we're also going to reference the image loader. Okay, great. So we're going to go back to Sublime into my webpack.config file. But you can see right now that we are applying options specifically for this loader. So it sounds like we need to be explicit that the options correspond to file loader and not another one. So instead, I'm going to use loaders and make that equal to an array. And then for each object within it, we can reference all of the relevant data. So now it's very clear that the options correspond to file loader alone. Next, we're just using image loader, so I can reference it like we normally would. But yeah, if image loader eventually needs options of itself, then you could do the long form. Now, the next step is, well, we have to pull in the image somehow. We could reference it in a style sheet, which we'll do in a minute. Or remember, you can always import images into memory. So we could say import Zelda from zelda.jpg, and let's just compile that down. And yes, we can see the image, but also notice that the size decreased. So once again, if we reveal this in the Finder, the original is 202K, but the generated image should be less, 112K. And once again, that is specifically because we're using the image loader. So you can see it's incredibly easy to implement. So once again, let's just see it without the loader applied. 202K. So it wasn't modified whatsoever, but once again, we pull in the image loader and it will automatically do this work for us. So now what we could do is bring back a CSS support. So we could say test for CSS files and then use the CSS loader. Now back to main.js, we will require styles and then create that. And then here, yeah, we could apply it to the background or whatever. All right, so does that all make sense now? In our Webpack config file, we are testing for CSS files, and we are using the CSS loader. Our main.js does in fact require that. So when Webpack comes across that CSS, once again, we are specifying that we want to intercept that loading, and we want to apply the CSS loader to it. So the CSS loader resolves and optimizes the imports and your URLs. So we should be all set to go now. Run it again. And if we switch back, yeah. So we have within main.js, you can see that we did inline it. We haven't used the extract plugin for this episode. It's not necessary. But still, at the exact same time, we were able to optimize this image, even though it was stored in a style sheet. Now, do remember, though, in closing, it's not going to apply to anything that is absolutely referenced. And that's because Webpack assumes it's an absolute path. It could be an image that you don't even host. So it's going to ignore those. So for example, if I were to say something like this, then if we run it, well then of course we don't see Zelda here. And that's because it's an absolute path, so the file loader won't even apply. Webpack will ignore this entirely and assume that you know where the image should go. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, finally, to end the video, right now you can see that our test isn't quite right because we're also checking for fonts. So let's split those up really quickly. Our test now will target fonts alone, So yeah, SVG is actually kind of an interesting thing with Webpack because it could refer to a font or it could also refer to an image. So that's definitely something you need to keep in mind. Anyways, we're going to use the file loader for any fonts that could exist that you import, like if you pull in a Bootstrap font or something like that. Anyways, now this can just be responsible for the images, in which case it'll use the file loader. And notice that now the images directory is more appropriate, and the fonts can just go either into a fonts directory if you want to apply an option for that, or it'll just spit it into the dist directory, whatever you want there.